listened to you, to me, to Bristol, to the JFC meetings, to meetings when he was on the council 10 years ago. So this is a great opportunity to applaud him for stepping forward, but it's also a reality that he's coming forward with an idea that's been here and never acted on. And he's heard it from myself as well as others, so he's here tonight. I think the work is ours. It's up to us. Now, we don't have an agenda item other than starting to look at the tax district. And I, by no means, thought I'm going into that meeting and coming out with a recommendation on a joint tax district for the two towns when we refer to the 29th meeting. Anything that can be done faster is always welcomed if the outcome is the same. But going into this process, I'm thinking and hoping that maybe within a few years, we may be able to get something done, or at least a year. But by no means would I enter into a process thinking that tonight we'll figure it out, and if not, that's it, it's over for that. No, so I think the same feeling, although the frustration you share, as all of us who have been involved in politics and committees as long as you have, as long as all of us have, we share that frustration of something being there forever and then just dying. But I don't think that's our intent, and I don't think it's the intent of the two councils who are putting themselves out there to participate, as well as finally hearing support from other individuals, which are key, like the committee. So I hope that helps.
From my perspective, it does, Joe. Just to reinforce my point, so you understand something, is the time frame you're talking about, the makeup of both of those two councils can change. That's what happened last time. And when that happens, the same commitment isn't necessarily there at the council level. I'm not saying to ignore the bodies, whether it's the town council or the school committee, once the task force gets put together or that body gets put together to create something. My frustration stems from the fact that there were council members that moved to put that group together with the intention of moving forward with what that group came forth with. That's the way it was proposed, and that was more than 5 years ago. Okay, it went nowhere because those council members were no longer there, and the new ones didn't have the same history, the same drive, and my comments on let this group act and let it go and let it get, and with the hope that there would be support from the three bodies that initiated it, is just to make sure it still is going forward and that roadblock is not there when they're done. If they could be done by March, by the end of February, like Kenny's saying, maybe. But if not, let it keep going and let it be on the ballot the next time November rolls around, the following year or the year after that. Whatever it takes, but give them a goal to reach for so that they're not sitting complacent saying, we don't have to meet. I listened to Kenny say they should meet once a month. They don't need to meet necessarily once a month if they tell, and they won't if you tell them they've got 2 years to come up with it. So I want to give a push and tell them they got as much time as they need, but I'd like to strive for something sooner so that it can get to the legislature so that they can massage it the way they have to before it makes it to a ballot.
I hear you, and I'm not going to do a point counterpoint, but my last input is going to be very simply, when the Charter Review Commission comes together, they know that they have 12 months. And they also know that they have the next 4 months to bring that to the councils. If you want an appointed body to have an end result, which is then delivered to the voters, be careful what you ask for. You right now are talking about the frustrations of the living process of elected officials. The fact that they are alive, they're very much like water. It's a body, it's there one day, it's made up in the same room or the same area by different molecules the next day. That's how we deal with what we deal with. We may have a new superintendent next year, who knows? You may not. You may decide. You may decide, Paul, that you have something else you want to do with your life.
Joe, the superintendent issue that's on the
That being said, I think that's a difficult discussion point to weave into the process of beginning a look that is duly noted. So the motion that you're taking would, if passed, you'd be looking for the president of the Bristol Council as well as myself to add this item to the 29th agenda.
Correct.
And the item, again, if you could just...
It would just be that a task force be created with a makeup of, and I, like the last one was, with in essence, the chair or president of each council or their designate, the town administrator, town manager from each community, an appointed person from each, appointed by each town council, superintendent, the chair or designee of the school committee and another school committee.
So you're going so that issue would be, so you're putting your support towards that issue. So then it's up to the two councils at that point to then figure out if that's the direction we want to go or how we want to use the support that you put towards that issue. Correct?
Pretty much, yeah.
We don't often agree on things, Joy, but on this one, I like the idea of a task force, but I'd like to have the meeting on the 29th first and visit and listen to the two town councils chat first. I've read the editorials like other people have, and I've also had conversations with people on the councils and representatives, and it's going to sound kind of strange, but we haven't, this is the first time I've heard what the composition of this task force would be. I haven't had the opportunity to digest it or to discuss it or to decide whether that's the appropriate way to go. So for that reason and that reason alone, I'm not going to vote for this tonight because I need to come on the 29th. I need to hear what your thoughts are in person and not necessarily things that I'm reading or hearing from other people, and then I want to see how everybody feels about what that task force should be made up of. And in the end, I believe that both councils and the school committee should be in full support of whatever it is we decide to do. So I'm not ready to vote on this motion tonight. I'm ready to entertain, absolutely entertain the task force. But as you said, I can slow down just a little so I can see where we're going and what we want to do. And I appreciate what Paul's been talking about, but this is the first time I've heard it, and I'm not prepared to vote on something that I've heard for the first time tonight. So that's for the benefit of the audience as to why you see a no vote from me tonight. Thank you.
Understood. And Rep. Marshall made it clear earlier that he, although has had discussions on the topic, we did not get together. We played telephone tag, and we did not put together an itinerary in regards to the chronology of what we should be doing. So hearing that the 29th was spit out, this is not, at this calendar date, been a priority for research, been a priority for participation. What I've been involved in, probably others, has been looking at the, and I know Dr. Andrade has, the joint tax districts. That's where my resources have gone. That's what we were preparing. So to put this on the agenda, it will be very simple. It'll be there. The discussion and action will simply be this: the school committee is looking for the support. If even that night there may not even be anything other than this is an idea that has support. So I have no problem putting it on an agenda, but in regards to Ms. McBride's points, this is not a research topic that I have any information other than what we've shared tonight, which is anecdotal at best in regards to what we're going to do with this. I think this is a very, very serious issue, and I know you all do also. The magnitude and the impact of what outcome will be needs to be in many ways understood before you even submit it, because you do have to be careful what you wish for. In our efforts of preservation, we don't know necessarily what the public is thinking. We hope we do, but I think that time has to be put in the research, and I agree with Mr. Silva in regards to not having an open-ended outcome that goes nowhere, and I think that can be controlled easily with the wording in the mission statement.
I think the motion, from what I understand, is to ask the joint legislation at the August 29th meeting to consider or to appoint a task force. I don't know how much research you really need to do to put into like creating a task force. You know, part of the mission of that task force, or even the discussion at joint finance. I mean, all we're doing is asking someone to create a task force. We have some ideas and some suggestions on who should be on it, but we're not saying these need to be on there. This is just our motion. I think we need to get started. And with all due respect, I understand that, you know, these things need to be deliberative. We need to be thinking about them. We need to be doing the research. But, creating a task force is not the same thing as putting, a bond on the ballot next year. It's just really creating a body, which, we're talking about representatives of the different organizations, and I guess I'm not seeing, to me, we got to get started at some point, and I think getting a task force, or at least considering, I mean, that's what our motion is to ask you to consider or to put together a task force. You don't have to do it, but, I think having us ask you is an important first step, so you at least know when you get to joint finance to say, gee, Mr. Representative Marshall's going to do his spiel and his presentation, and you're going to be saying, gee, should we have a task force? Well, what does the school committee mean? Well, you'll know what the school committee feels already, because we've already had a vote to say we support a task force for this, and whether or not you go forward on August 29th to do it is totally up to you, but it's, at least you know that we're behind this task force, regardless of who's on it, that we, again, take the first step.
I guess I will do counterpoint. To hear you as a voting member say that you want to support something that you don't even know its makeup, you don't even know what their mission statement is, you briefly know that they're going to be looking at the enabling legislation.
I wouldn't even have any role in making that up.
I understand that, and that's what you're saying you support. So that's a bit scary, to hear that you support wholeheartedly just getting going. Let's just start. Let's make sure we get going. We are going to be the bodies who are mandated to come up with what this task force is going to look at, how we want them to look at it. It's been said, we don't want them to look at dismantling the system, right?
Yeah.
So we know that. But do we want it to be something that requires a change in financing? I heard Rep. Marshall say that he's looking at discussing with RIDE. How comfortable do you think other towns, our sister town may be, in regards to that discussion? They'd want to participate. We would want to participate. Change doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be beneficial to the other side. So if you think that a $65 million budget, the byproduct of the body that you sit on, the two towns support, is just something that we're going to just, let's put it together as quickly as we can.
Just the task force.
Just the task force. Right, just the task force. And the end result of the task force is to bring it to the legislature for changes, potentially.
You decide what the mission of the task force would be.
Correct.
Ah.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Good evening. I had to look up the quote, "Past performance is not indicative of future results." My reference is the comment about and it's a fair comment, but it was a comment about no action was taken from that committee. So I say it again, past performance is not indicative of future results. So just because it happened in the past doesn't mean it's going to happen in the future. Second thing is that it's so important, this conversation that we're having right now, that we have council people, we have 4 counselors, including myself, from Bristol. We have not had dialogue about this, nor will we here, because this is not a meeting for us, this is your meeting. We will certainly want to have a lot of dialogue. Margie made a good point, which is this is the first time you're hearing about it. I'm in the same boat. So I do believe the idea of looking into possibilities makes sense. You supporting a committee seems to make sense, but the committee, its action, its charge, its end results, what it's looking for, what it's not looking for, Joe made that point earlier, hasn't even been discussed. So certainly you can support it, and we would know that you would support a committee, but I'm not sure what you're supporting, to be quite honest. I don't know what we would take from this next step. I think the feeling and the want is the right thing, the motivation is the right thing. The end result is we have no tangibles to walk away with when you support this, in my opinion. So, my council has not been taking steps. If you look at our agenda, you'll see executive session. We've had legal discussions. Executive session, as you know, does not allow us to make policy, nor would we. Policy happens in public, but we have had discussions. There is not just no action happening. So,
I'm not, and I know I may be doing this to you, and I apologize. I really should have done it to Joe, because I'm sitting here and asking my vice chair. When I said I would entertain a motion, I said I would entertain a motion to create a task force to look into the issues being raised by Mr. Marshall and how the resolution of those issues would come. If that's too vague, I can be very much specific so that it would be, because to me it was not as vague as this discussion has become. There's nobody on this committee that I know of that would want to support a task force simply to have one, have somebody else dictate later on what it would do. Mr. Marshall stood here saying that we need to do something to resolve and assure that the continued success of a school district in this community. And what needs to be done is to look at the enabling legislation for what modifications and changes may be made, most notably things that deal with the financial components of the school district and how it's funded going forward. That's what that task force should be focusing on, those issues as he stated them and as he stated them to me before. Maybe I made some assumptions because I've engaged in these discussions pretty much with everybody in this room that's elected, so with your exception, so I don't think I've had those with you. She's still there, I can see her. But anyway, I've had those discussions. So I may be making an assumption, but it's not just a task force to have one. It's a task force to initiate a process for looking into the issues that are being brought forth right now by Mr. Marshall and what he brought forth some 5 years ago as well. They had specificity then with an end result. And the only thing that I believe that I said that may not have come across correctly is I'd like to tell them we'd like to have it by February 28th. Because then we have a shot and a goal to work for. If it's not done by that date, I don't care as long as it's done right. Whatever time it takes to do it right. Joe stood here and said the only thing he knows about is the tax district. That's what they've done looking into. For all you know, when that gets there, that could become the focus. It's one of the charges, or part of the charge, that would be given based on what Mr. Marshall is saying. So there would be focus and there would be a direction. It's not open-ended. Okay, sorry, go ahead.
Well, simply put, if you decide to move forward with that, then I will certainly, my colleagues and I know them very well, happy to discuss and consider anything. So if this is the next step, then we'll put it in front of them, we'll have open dialogue about it. Thank you.
Okay, one second. Go ahead. I've been listening very intently to what's been said over the last many minutes. And I think that I have a number of thoughts. One of which is I agree actually to some extent that perhaps it's inappropriate for us to vote tonight on a motion to approve moving forward with the task force, mostly because of the miscommunication or misunderstanding amongst the various people who have been listening in this room as to what that motion would even mean. I think that we're fully capable of coming up with a concrete proposal for what we think a task force should do and voting on that. I am firmly behind the idea of a task force, but I don't want to send unclear signals as to what it is that we're looking for. And to the extent that we're going to send unclear signals, I think that it's a bad idea, or that there's even a risk that we're sending an unclear signal. I think that's a bad idea for us to do so. With regards to timing, I think we're, in many ways, we're putting the cart before the horse and talking about what is or is not possible. Right now, we're at the preliminary stage of talking about discussing having a task force that will come forward with recommendations. And we probably all have ideas in our heads as to what those recommendations might be and what it might take to have those recommendations fulfilled, whether it be through simply the passage of legislation through the General Assembly with a signature from the governor, whether it then requires a ballot initiative that needs the support of the voters, or whether it might be something even with less of a legislative and electoral process behind it than that. But the point is, we don't know. The task force, A, we haven't even agreed to create it yet. B, it hasn't been put together yet. And C, it hasn't come up with any recommendations yet. So when I think about how task forces are most able to be successful, it is associated with giving them a specific charge and a timeline with which to produce a result. And the way that I see a task force here working and working effectively is if we put together a specific charge that says, for example, by, let's say, February 28th, the task force is charged with providing recommendations for proposed amendments to the enabling legislation to resolve regarding the way that the school district is funded. And they must provide a recommendation by that date, or a recommendation to continue the study for a specific additional period, or a recommendation that the task force be disbanded and that no recommendations be made altogether. And then at that point, we've got another marker in the process that allows us to move to whatever the next step is. But we don't need to predetermine whether or not something is going to be able to be done in that period of time, whether or not things should end if it isn't done in that period of time, or whether or not there should be more time given in order to let the process play out itself. Which is why when Mr. Silva is saying that what he doesn't care whether or not something is done by that deadline, he just wants it to be done right, he's exactly right. But it is important to provide markers and deadlines along the way. So, if I back up for a second, I'm wholeheartedly in support of the creation of a task force to study amendments to the enabling legislation and or other solutions to the current concerns that people have about the continued vitality of the